And
Yeah.
if you want to, if you don't want to speak up, you can definitely send your questions into the chat, and we'll get to your questions. Yeah, either publicly or just send a direct message to Hayati, myself, or Paul. That would be just fine as well.
Yeah. Just very quickly repeat for everyone who came in right now. We're from Paul, we're the peer advisors for writing, and this is kind of a free time for questions that you have about writing, about AC1, AC2, about APA or other styles of citation, anything at all, really.
Yeah.
So unmute yourselves, type in the chat. Feel free to just go ahead.
So
Okay.
So I see that we have quite a number of first year students here.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume that maybe there are things that you find unfamiliar with in terms of academic writing. So maybe you want to ask us some tips, some questions on perhaps how to survive writing at
Yeah.
university. We'll be able will help you answer those questions. Yeah. So don't be shy. Just ask your questions.
I have some questions.
Okay, sure. Please go ahead.
Can I ask you? I mean, I found some title. I made some topics for my writing, and there are several of them, and I wasn't sure which one would be the best one. And like I want to know why it is good and why the other one is not that good.
Okay.
So I have to. The theme for our class was it's about the immigration and the human right. And the first one I made was does international immigration. The international migration brings a better life in reality. And I want to ask about this first one first, and then I want to hear why if this is bad and why it is bad.
Okay. Okay. So I think that did you just one quick question? Did you join our brainstorming and topic selection workshops last
Yes,
week?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So from that workshop, you might know that there are definitely some elements that make a topic good and reasons that make it not so good, right? So one perhaps the general rule is that your topic should not be too broad, but it should not be too narrow as well, right? And you
Yes.
you also don't want it to be sort of just basic facts that you cannot argue or do anything with it, right?
Okay.
So perhaps turning back to your topic, so it's about international migration and
I can just type it in
yeah,
the
sure, type it
chat.
in the chat.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
I
if
should
anyone else
have done this.
who's here has any ideas about this, please go
Yeah.
ahead. So
So
does international migration bring a better life in reality?
yeah, so like what I said, do you think that it's too broad? Do you think it's too
Yeah.
narrow?
I think it was too broad, so
Yeah.
Can I ask a couple of like preliminary questions? What class is this for?
This is for the ACL one.
AC1.
For AC1?
Yeah, AC1.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for AC1, what you do is you write different kinds of essays, right? So one of the most important things to do is pinpoint what kind of assignment you're writing. What kind of paper are you supposed to be writing here?
It's sorry, one second. It's ARL assignment, so it's annotated reference list.
Oh, okay. This is for ART.
This
Okay.
is for ART.
ARL. It says.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
ARL.
Right. So your ARL is basically your final assignment for your ART class. It's an annotated reference list. And what an annotated reference list is essentially is, so you pick a topic and then you take a bunch of sources, that you imagine you are writing this paper. So you take a bunch of sources that you that you could use to write this paper, and then you annotate them essentially. So as I'm sure your ART teacher has told you, you have a list of criteria on which you discover whether a source is whether it's a credible source or whether it might be a little more questionable. So for this, you have an important part of academic writing is always keeping your assignment in mind. So you have to pick good, credible articles for your ARL, right?
Okay.
And then you move into whether or not this is a good topic, which Paul will take you through.
Okay.
Paul, what do you think?
So I think I do agree with everything you said about like ARL and ART. I also want to mention that because this is kind of more general workshop, right? Like a Q&A, we don't go into the specifics really deep here. So we are kind of want everyone here to understand the whole concept of the idea of the classes. So if you still will have some questions regarding your specific topic about your specific class, just go ahead and book a scheduled session with a pause, and we can just then go face to face with you one-on-one about everything you have, about all the questions, about your specific topic selections, about your specific class. So yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
No, it's
No
totally
worries.
fine. Yes.
So yeah, speaking of that, we are actually open for registration, right? Are we? Yeah. We're
Yes,
open
we
for
opened
registration.
yesterday, I think.
Yeah, for registration, and you can start book us for next session, which is Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Tuesday
21st, yes.
Tuesday next week. We will start there. Yeah. So
but so Sangvin, to answer your question, so without diving into the specifics of your topic, what we can do is look at possibly what makes a good topic, kind of running over our couple of workshops from last week. And I can say that you want, when you're picking a topic, you want to be as specific as possible with your parameters, right? You want to define what it is you will and will not be talking about. So, if we were to take the example of your topic, do you think it's a good topic? What do you think you could improve with it?
I thought, like you guys mentioned, I thought it's maybe this too broad topic, and then actually made up with some other topics too. So, but since this is not like, since this session is not talking about those stuff, then is it okay if I can talk with one of you after this class for like a 10 minute or like 5 minutes, so I can decide my topic?
Okay. If like towards the end of this session, like for example, like the 10 minutes at the end, if no one asks any questions, then we think we might be able to help you a little bit more.
Okay.
But for now, since everyone's here, we might want to have just like a general view so that everyone can understand what we're saying here.
And on that note, I have a private message. So we have a student here who has gone for a few intro to IR classes and has found the reading material slightly difficult to understand. What can they do without falling behind? Okay, this is not technically a writing question, but I'm going to let it go because it's definitely a general first year kind of, it's a very real concern for first year students. I can't speak for the other two majors, but I know that the IR reading material can be very heavy and it can be very dense, and it's very different writing and analytical style. Min, you remember our first year readings, we didn't know what was happening.
Especially during your very first semester taking intro to IR, everything seems very new, and like you have to take in a bunch of knowledge. And but I would say that once that has passed, then you would be able to do basically anything. So just hang in there. And yeah.
I think one thing. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say it doesn't really depend much on the major, so the same thing happens pretty much in every major, and DBI is not an exception for sure. So you kind of wanted to do and try as much as possible to try not to fall behind all the materials on the resources, but for surely just also like take care of yourself, your health. Don't like try to over exhaust yourself in your first semester. I think that would
And
be a
on the
perfect
topic of like
comparison.
IR readings, one thing that you kind of have to do is read them over and over again, because then you get used to a specific writing style, a specific language, a specific kind of way that people, academics unfortunately talk. Then if the readings are still hard for you to understand, one thing that you can do is look for alternative resources that will help you understand their content. You're going to have to get used to the writing style, but there are always resources that will help you understand the content better. Your professor can help you understand your content better, but you also have to know that what you're feeling is completely normal, and we have all felt that, and it's okay to kind of not have a clue what's going on. Again, completely normal, but I think unfortunately this is something that you will get used to really slowly, and you can always look for other ways to kind of supplement your research and readings. Do you have a follow-up question on that? Is there anything you've been finding hard specifically, or any parts of your writing? Because I see you're a first semester student, judging by your student ID, and it can always be kind of challenging. Or does anyone else have any other questions for us?
So just a quick shout out. So I sent in the chat, which I will be doing one more time. I sent in the chat the link where you can book your one-on-one sessions with us starting from next week. So just go in the link, choose your preferable day, and then your preferable hour, and then you can basically have one-on-one meeting with us about your writings, your assignments in class. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're open for questions. Unmute yourselves, type in the chat. But until then, we could just kind of start a general discussion on, especially since most of our students are from AC1, from AC2, from ART, what have you guys been finding challenging so far? What have been the big challenges of writing? What have made you be like, I hate this class? Because Min and I, especially at our workshops last week, had students just be like, students had very genuine questions about APA, about picking a topic, but we also had students who were like, what do you do if you hate AC1?
So I have a question sent to me. So it's a really interesting question, and I think everyone can benefit from hearing the answer. So could you explain the relation between a research question and a thesis statement?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
really
Yeah.
good question. Yeah. So does anyone want to and tackle this question?
Paul, you want to go for it? You were very excited by it.
I mean, that's a really good one, a very important one, I would say, because definitely there is a huge, strong correlation between the research question and your thesis statement. Those are one of the most fundamentals of your whole essay, and you need to do as much work on those things before actually like starting to write the whole thing. This should be one of your first things you would do in any paper, I would say. So you should try to spend, I would say, as much time for them to be as clear, as specific as possible, and so they really do correlate with each other, because otherwise you just can be lost through the afterwards like processes. And if you really try and make your research question as well as this thesis statement really clear, then you will have a really good like outline for the whole essay and good plan for the whole essay, and you can just then follow all the steps to write a good paper.
Yeah.
Um,
I think in kind of addition, Min, would you mind pasting that in the chat again?
yeah. So I will send all the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
I will tailor them and then put them in the chat.
Okay, but in kind of addition to what Paul said, a very simple way of understanding the relationship between your research question and your thesis statement is that your thesis statement is the answer to your research question. So with your research question, you ask about what you want to find out in your paper. what are the causes of the plastic not degrading in the Pacific Ocean or something. And then with your thesis statement, you answer this. The causes that you will be looking at or that you will be addressing in your paper are A and B and C, right? And your research question, you don't have to state it in your paper. You don't have to go, hey, here's my research question. But you have to very strongly, very specifically state your thesis statement in the first paragraph of your paper. And this is not specific to AC1 or AC2 or ART. Pretty much every paper you're ever going to write will need a strong thesis statement. You can definitely put in your research question kind of reworded. You can put it in as a question, but it can, have several parts. But your thesis statement is always one sentence, maybe two, generally one, and it aims to explain what your responses to your research questions are.
Yeah. So just imagine one of your friends comes up to you and asks a research question to you, and you would answer to that question. Your answer would basically be your thesis statement, right? And in one way or another, your thesis statement would basically include your arguments as well as implicitly say what the research question is, right? So that would be our answers to your question, the relationship between a thesis statement and a research question, that it is a thesis statement is the answer to your research question, right? So yeah, that was
I
a
have
really
a
good question.
question.
Yeah, so
oh no, okay, this is a big question. Why
you
do we need citations?
Okay, let me just type that in the chat.
Yeah. And again, in a big way, like like finding your readings a little challenging. Citations are really, really challenging for everyone all the time, but they're also really challenging if you don't know why you need them, what they are, what you're going to do with them, why all the little commas and the capitals and the italics is so important. Who here does not like citations and does not know why we need them?
Yeah, just a show of hands, or
raise your hands.
Yeah, raise your hand.
Because thank you.
Thank you. So
Yeah,
Oh.
I see hands go.
Yeah, so definitely a couple.
Yeah, definitely a couple. Yeah.
Exactly. So let us break down citations for you, and in the process, let me also so with PAW, because we kind of work on understanding what students find challenging, we work on certain projects that students can use. And on the website that I am going to give you, there's a bunch of projects on academic writing that can help you out. But okay, let me take the one on citations, and Paul and Min, please jump in if I miss anything.
Yeah, sure. Well,
so
that's up though. It's something. I think it's better. I think it's something that you get familiarized with. You familiarize yourself. It's something that you don't get on your first try, right? You need to try again, try again, try again. So be patient with yourself. Yeah, that's one word of advice from myself.
Yeah. And it's only going to get more important as you go into your major courses. So you kind of have to get the hang of it in your first couple of in your first 2 semesters. So citations, basically the big no-no of academic writing is plagiarism, which is where you take someone else's work, either their work or their ideas, and you pass it off as your own without giving credit to the person who wrote it. And that is a big problem, in that that's academic dishonesty, but that's also very illegal, and people get fined and go to jail for that when they're academics and they write these things. So one thing you want to avoid at all costs, in any university, especially also in TIU, is plagiarizing. Now there's different forms of plagiarizing. We're not going to get into that because you'll go into that for AC and ART, but you want to avoid all of them. Block plagiarism, idea plagiarism, all of it. Okay, and what you do to avoid plagiarizing is citing your sources, right? And you're going to hear the phrase cite your sources, cite your sources, cite your sources all the time. And what it means is, and it's really, really easy. When you take an idea or a quotation or some research from somewhere else, you write down who you got it from and when they wrote that. Okay, so at TIU, a lot of what your classes do is APA, which is the American Psychological Association. So different associations have different ways in which you say, hey, this person wrote this. Here's how I know that. Here's the book I got it from. Here's the paper I got it from. So we use APA. And when you cite, so let's say Paul wrote a paper and I'm like, oh, that is a cool idea, Paul. I'm going to take that from you. So then I'm like, okay, cool. So I quote Paul. I rephrase what Paul wrote. I don't use the same words, but I rephrase the idea. Now, even though I'm not using the same words, it's still not my idea. It's Paul's idea. And so I put down whatever I'm going to write within brackets. I put, here's the thing, and there are two kinds of citations very quickly. You get what you put in the body of your paper and what you put at the end, at the reference list. So what you put in the body of your paper is really short. It's just like a little introduction. Okay, so you put Paul 2021. Yep, close bracket. And there's a very specific method to doing this. It depends on how many people wrote the paper. You'll cover all of that. If it's still confusing, come to Paul and we'll talk it through. This is like a very brief introduction. But then I'm like, okay, Paul 2021 could be anyone. And that could be any paper. So then what you do is at the end of your paper, you have a reference list and you write down in much more depth Paul 2021. Why going to Paul will help absolutely everyone from this journal at this time. And here's the website. So it depends on what kind of source you're citing. Then your reference list comes out differently. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm done with that. And then you cite the next person. But that's why you need citations, to make sure you're giving someone enough credit for their ideas, to avoid plagiarizing. And we take plagiarism very strictly at TIU. So you I think the first time you get spoken to, then you fail the assignment, then you fail the class, then you fail all your classes. So the solution here is cite everything. When in doubt, cite.
Yeah. So in AC1 and AC2, your teachers might be a little bit more lenient because it's your writing process. You're getting used to citing stuff. So you might at times, one time or two, accidentally plagiarizing. But when it comes to major classes, basically your professors have zero tolerance policy. Once you plagiarize, you will fail the class, fail the assignment, and fail the class. So it's not that intimidating if you come to think about it, but it's just something to keep your academic honesty always upright, right? And so that's the reason why we need citations. The big reason is that so that you don't plagiarize, but the personal reason is that so that you don't get yourself into trouble.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I want to just add really quickly, thank you, Hayati and Ming, for like explaining everything in details here. This might sound as a lot to take, but don't like worry a lot. Don't be shocked or panic because it's definitely not as hard to format. And there are a lot of resources where you can always go to and find the specific formatting for like specific style, for specific data. And as Hayati mentioned, she sent a link to PAW resources. You can always go there and find all the necessary links. And again, it's not it's definitely a lot to take, but it's not that hard, and it just requires a lot of practice. But then you'll get it eventually, and it will be easy go for you.
Yeah, this is also another resource you can use for help with citations. It's the one I use all the time. Very, very helpful.
So on that note, we have another question, and I think it's one of the important questions about citation. Is it possible to overcite in a paper? What if one's paper is just full of citations?
Okay. This is a great question. Thank you. Okay, does anyone want to take this?
The blunt answer would be yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's definitely cases where you oversight a lot of things. Like for every sentence, you would have a citation to support that. But I think that your teachers will get into details. But personally speaking, I would say that for every citation you have, you would need one or more two sentences just to explain the ideas that these authors want to get through. So imagine if you have a lot of citations and you have to explain a lot of stuff, then that would just not be good for your paper, right? It would just be so lengthy
Yeah.
and cumbersome. Yeah.
So
And
kind of, oh no, go ahead, Paul.
I just want to say that the most important thing here is in a lot of different papers, the most important thing is your own idea, your own opinion. And if you just throw as much citations as you can there and think, oh, I found this very, very smart, I don't know, sentences to back up my whole idea, your own like point might get lost in between those citations, and it will be not only bad for your work itself, it will be bad for the reader because they might not understand, are they just reading the materials from you or from someone else, because there are so much in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, to kind of add to that, when I said always cite, cite when you're in doubt, I meant more in terms of, make sure you're not plagiarizing. But instances where you don't have to cite are when something is common knowledge, right? So, and by common knowledge, what we mean is when something is cited in, I think, 5 or more academic journals, right? When it has so much substance to it that it doesn't require something to back it up with. So if I'm going to make a statement like, sometimes the sky is blue, I don't massively need a citation for that. But if I'm going to make a statement like, so I'm from Sri Lanka, and if I'm going to say that the population of Sri Lanka dipped in 1985, but then it rose in 1986, I could be making that up. I wasn't there. That needs a citation. So make sure that what you're citing actually needs a citation always. Then exactly what Paul was saying in terms of you don't want a paper full just full of citations. You need analysis. You need to analyze the ideas, because then all you're going to have is a paper full of other people's ideas. Your own opinion is not going to come out as strongly. And so a neat way of doing that is by adhering to the Texas paragraph structure, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, where you structure your paragraphs. You start with a topic sentence, you give in, you talk about what your point is, you give an example, and then you analyze your example. You always analyze it. You analyze, hey, okay, if the population of Sri Lanka dipped here and then rose here, so what? How is that related to my paper? And then you're going to say, well, it's important because of its implications for blah and blah and blah. So make sure you're always analyzing your whatever you're citing. I have to write down all the sources. Sangbin, for what exactly?
The question that we are doing right now, like it's about the papers, right? Like a newspaper. If we use like a citations for that, then we have to like write down where it comes from in the paper.
Hi.
Maybe I can just ask in like a personal, like private, like academic.
So when you say you have to write down where you got it from, are you talking about like the reference list that you do at the end of the paper?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Sorry, what did you say? Okay.
That's okay. So basically, when you're citing sources, you put in, like I was saying, you put in like, Paul 2021 in the paper, but then after it, you need to put like a full thing about where you got it from. There's a very specific format for that. and that goes in a separate list at the end of your paper.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Yes. Thank you.
So we have two more questions on citation. The first one would be: is there any way we can check plagiarism? I mean, there the school uses Turnitin, right? And
Yeah.
I don't think there are many softwares out there for students usage to check your plagiarism, but I would say that you can train yourself to not plagiarize. There are definitely websites for that. You can train yourself not to plagiarize so that you don't have to worry about plagiarism.
Yeah, because there are online websites. We're all students, we've all panicked, but you have to understand Turnitin, which all of your professors use, is the biggest database. Everyone's university papers go through Turnitin. Any other kind of dodgy site you might find online is not going to give you an accuracy report that is remotely close to Turnitin. So even if you find a weird site online that tells you, oh, you've got no plagiarism here, you probably know where you got your sources from. So kind of keep an eye on that. That's about where you check plagiarism. And then on the same note about citation, can we use the citation section in MS Word, or do you need to use an external website to do so?
We would recommend you to do it manually by hand.
By hand.
Yeah.
Which
At least
is
for the
terrible.
first couple of semesters.
Yeah.
So you practice yourself, and then you kind of understand how everything works, and you are 100% sure in every citation. If so, maybe at the end of your study you can try to use some other, but we really do not recommend to do so.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is some of the citation generating tools, they may not be accurate all of the time, but unless you're really sure that this is a correct or an incorrect citation, you're not going to know the difference.
Yeah.
You need to kind of, like Paul was saying, train yourself into it. So we would recommend, do it by hand. I'm in my 4th year. I still do all my citations by hand. It's a lot of fun.
So yeah, just like, let's just give an example for that. So like, imagine you have a source that you have trouble identifying, like what kind of source that is. Is it a journal article? Is it a newspaper article? You can like make some personal judgments or come to your friend's help if you do it manually, right? If you just throw the source onto a citation machine, then it doesn't it can't differentiate what kind of source that is, right? And maybe you end up citing the wrong format for that kind of particular source. So like Hayati said, citation tools don't always aren't always correct. So it's better if so we don't encourage you to do so, but if you still insist on doing so, we would recommend you to have some first-hand knowledge and experience in terms of, so that you can check what those tools have got for you, right?
Yeah,
definitely. And I want to add one more thing about like checking plagiarism, especially in the earlier courses. For example, in the first semester, in the second, AC1, AC2, ART, often the teachers, they allow you several attempts before actually submitting your final paper. So for example, you do your rough draft and you can submit it, check all the plagiarism. So it will it will send you back a whole report about your paper, so you can check, you can then practice it by yourself, make sure you correct everything accordingly, and then when you are actually submitting your final paper, you will be, I think, 100% sure that there are non-plagiarism or very little. So yeah.
But check with your teacher, right? Check to see if you can resubmit. Yeah, if you can download and resubmit. Yeah,
definitely.
Definitely.
Because that really helps when you can kind of look at your own work and be like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I didn't cite this properly. So that's really helpful. Do all the professors require APA style?
No.
No, but
Most,
for
yeah.
AC1, ART, and AC2, if I'm not mistaken, and always check this with your professor, but it's generally APA.
It's almost all every
Almost always.
Yes.
almost
Yeah.
always AP in those three classes, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
However, when you go into your major courses, that entirely depends on which professor you have.
Yeah.
Different professors have different preferences. And you might have to kind of self-study up a bit on that one. A lot of professors don't mind as long as it's consistent.
Yeah.
As long as you don't use different reference styles in one paper.
Yeah.
So if you're an IR student, Professor Honig prefers Chicago.
Also Professor Mema.
And Mem also prefers Chicago, yes. So Paul, is there a specific kind that DBI professors prefer?
Honestly, I haven't encountered it yet because I'm still in my second year, right? So I haven't wrote a lot of papers for my major courses. So I cannot state it just now. But I think, yeah, it always depends on the professor. So make sure to just always check and you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next question, if we cite manually, then do we have to write the references at the end of the essay manually too? Well, I would say that's a yes.
Yeah.
You would definitely have to do the references at the end of the essay manually. Just a quick note, I think that in-text citations are definitely easier for you to do manually than references, but
They're like two things.
they're like two complete different things. But it's what I think what we're trying to say here is about the references at the end, right? The longer citations that require a little bit more work. Because in text citations, they usually just require a general format for all types of sources. But when it comes to the references, you would definitely need different formats for different types of sources. So it's always better to do it manually to check, because there are perhaps italicized letters, capitalized letters, commas, dots, blah blah blah, all the sorts um, that you can't really double check if you're using machines,
Yeah.
citing tools. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? Anything from AC1, AC2, citations, organization, what is a Texas paragraph, anything at all? We're completely open. Anyone has questions from major classes about different kinds of writing assignment?
So let's let's discuss a little bit like about your challenges during your first sort of writing process, right? So what was the biggest challenge that you encountered, Hayat?
When writing in my first semester or early on, I think this is kind of a small thing, but I realized at some point that my sentences were really, really, really long. Like they would hit like 5, 6 lines. And because of that, all my paragraphs were really long, which meant all my papers were really long. And I didn't know how to stop. And the reason I wanted to join PAW is because I hadn't identified this as an issue in my writing. And then Kat, Kat, Kat was an old PAW, and he identified this to me and he showed me how it was turning into like a recurrent issue. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But I used to have a lot of problems with that. I still fall back into it if I'm not careful. Paul, what do you think you found
As for
difficult?
me, I think a lot of people can actually correlate with that. I haven't heard about like Texas format before actually entering the university. So when I first encountered that during AC1 class, it was hard for me to understand every single part, and I had some troubles with especially explanation part and analysis part. I wasn't sure what specific information should be there. Yeah, but I think A lot of you who are studying AC1 now will definitely be talking about it with your professors for the whole semester, I would say, and the second semester as well.
Yeah, and there's a very quick guide that we made to the text's paragraph structure. Okay, any other questions? We are completely open, anything at all. Oh, I have a message in the chat. Okay, what makes a good AC2 topic? Oh, okay. I think, okay, so Min and I just finished like a series of workshops on topics, but what makes a good AC2 topic? Does anyone want to jump on this one? Paul, what do you think?
I would say because AC2 is definitely more complex subject in terms of writing a paper than AC1 and ART, you kind of want to make your topic look as, I would say, scientific, right, and complex as possible to show that in your paper you are using all the acquired knowledge during your first semester. So as you know, in AC2, you select a style of your paper by yourself usually. Your professor doesn't tell exactly what style you are supposed to write and what paper you are supposed to write, argumentative or cause effect. So because you're choosing by yourself, you need to make sure you're 100% sure in your style first, and then choose the topic accordingly. Again, be not broad, as specific as possible in your topic, but also as scientific as possible, I would say, to just show the overall knowledge and understanding.
So one tip that I always tell students when they pick topics for AC2 is that always try to keep in mind that you want to pick something that can keep you committed. You can't do something that you can't pick a topic that's gonna just stress you out half your way through, because in AC2 you just write one paper for the whole semester, and you need to keep a topic that's interesting enough for yourself, and that's not gonna just bore you out right halfway through. So yeah, so just keep that in mind when picking your topic for AC2. And also I think Paul mentioned a really good point, is that your topic needs to be scientific. And I think for not only scientific but also like academic, right, in terms of its tone. Yeah, in terms of its tone, your approach to it. And he mentioned another really good point, is that not too broad but not too narrow as well, because you want it to reach the length that your teacher requires. Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of elements that make one topic a good topic. But
yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind is that AC, ART, AC2, they're not content classes, they're writing classes. You are not being graded explicitly on your content. It doesn't matter, your content matters insofar as, the flow of your writing. Are your arguments well supported? But it's more to train you into using, into a specific academic writing style. Your content is not really important. So like Min said, pick a topic that isn't going to make you really, really sick of it by the end of the semester, and just focus on the actual researching and writing of it, not so much the content. What is your opinion on using paraphrasing tools?
Okay. It's not citation tool, it's paraphrasing tools.
Yeah, I've seen this. There's
we have tools for that. I don't even know about that.
I didn't know until I saw someone doing it last semester. There's a very handy little tool on Google Docs I think.
Okay.
Paul, you look like you know about this.
I mean, definitely, I was thinking a lot of people would know about like all the paraphrase and citation tools. Okay, but we certainly do not recommend, I would say from myself, I do not recommend to use that. The same goes as for, we mentioned before, as for citation tools, because there is a specific reason why teachers actually explain and teach how to paraphrase in the first semesters. Because again, if you use any tools, you cannot be sure in the outcome.
Mm.
And actually, while you are learning how to paraphrase, you can train your whole mind to come up with something else and come up with a little creativity to change the initial sentence into something else. Creativity is definitely very important in the writing and in the whole essays and papers. So it just it consists it's just a lot of different things mixed together.
Okay.
So we certainly, I think I am saying from the whole of us that
Mm.
we don't recommend to use any tools for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that with, so if you were using like a thesaurus to get different words, and I'm assuming the same goes for paraphrasing, it's very dependent on the context of your sentence. So if I have a sentence and I want to paraphrase it, I don't have a guarantee that the paraphrasing tool is going to give me the same meaning that I want. In the same way, if I use a thesaurus, or I just Google synonym for something and I pull up a couple of synonyms, they're not always going to have the same meaning. It's definitely okay in terms of widening your vocabulary or picking up new words, but always make sure that your sentence still makes sense.
Hmm.
It's like that episode of Friends where
Yeah,
Joey gets a thesaurus.
I was meaning to do that. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
meaning to tell about that.
Yeah,
That's
and he's trying to
definitely,
talk about his heart, but he's talking about his full-size
yeah.
aortic pump. So you want to make sure it still makes sense in terms of context.
So in terms of that, let's just share. So the original sentence was, they are warm, nice people with big hearts. And after using synonym, the thesaurus, that sentence becomes they're humid, prepossessing Homo sapiens with full-size aortic pumps. So that's definitely something you don't want. It's just a joke, but it's definitely something you want to avoid in your paper, so that what you're writing actually transfers what you want people to understand, right?
Yes.
And that's a really important aspect. Also, um, when you study paraphrasing, you also study about summarizing, I would say. So for example, some chunks from the original article that's too long, it cannot be paraphrased. That's when your summarizing skills come in, so that you can just take out the necessary information. Whereas if you put all of that chunk into your paraphrasing tools, you would have a different paragraph, but it's the length, it would just be the same. It would just be the same bulkiness of your paragraph, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I have a message in the chat here. When a professor demands that we have to provide full references for the other source material besides the readings he gave us, should I cite the readings he gave us or only the ones I chose on my own? This is a little bit of a confusing statement, so I'm going to put it in the chat, but without your name, don't worry. So is this, it would help if maybe you could private message me what class this is for, because yeah, it would help me.
But my experience with that is that, just to be on the safe side, if you're using the readings that your teacher gave you, just put that in the citation. It takes a little bit more work and efforts, but it's just avoids you another round of plagiarism. At the end, it's just to be on the safe side, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I figured that this was major. This was a question for major course. Yeah, and it is. So you can, these are things that professors are very open to responding to. You can shoot this professor an email and ask him. I know that they're very open to conversation with students. But generally, like Min said, always lean towards the side of like citing everything anyway. You can email and ask if you're not sure, but it doesn't take a lot to, just put in, the textbook that you're using for class or the readings from like last week.
As long as you're using it, just put it in.
Yeah.
That's my
Okay.
yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
So
think of this as like, an opportunity for you to meet your seniors and pick their brains.
Okay.
Ooh,
What was
question.
the major change that you would say stand out between AC1 and AC2? Any tips for AC1 students on AC2? I would say that prepare yourselves a little bit more. Not like mentally, but like on the writing skills, because I would say that AC1 and AC2 differs in the sense that the length of the paper as well as the content of your paper, right? So AC1, they're usually really short papers. Perhaps the last paper of your AC1 might be a little bit longer than others. But I would say that 10 pages, perhaps that's the top, right? For AC1. Perhaps a little bit more. But in AC2, the length just clicks on a different level. It might come to like 20 pages for some students who have ideas to talk about. And there are definitely some sections that you did not learn in AC1, right? So yeah, you will definitely be instructed along your way by your teachers, but just so you know that there are content-wise, they're pretty different, right? Yeah.
I would say for me, a couple of tips for AC1 students who are moving into AC2, like Min said, it's a bit of a shift, right? You're not writing, short papers anymore. You're writing one long research paper. And again, I know we said this earlier, but we're going to keep repeating it because personally, I was completely done with my AC2 topic by the end of the semester. Pick a topic, A, that you like, but B, that you can expand upon, because you're not writing 3 body paragraphs anymore with 3 separate points. You're probably going to have headings and then subheadings. It's going to require a lot more kind of detail to one point. So you can have one point, then you have sub point, but then you move into a different point. So pick something you can expand upon would be my suggestion. And also just everyone finds AC2 to be, a struggle. Reach out to your professors, reach out to your classmates, come to PAW, go to academic advising is great. But, just keep in mind that it's okay to struggle transitioning from AC1 to AC2.
Yeah. And I also want to mention the certain specific things that stand out as a difference. I would say it's definitely because it's more work, it's a lot more planning itself. So usually before you start writing your AC2 paper, you will do a theme chart, as it is called, where you stand all your major ideas, and then you are supposed to write down all your references before actually start writing the whole paper to correlate them with each other. And then usually in your AC1 papers, you only have like a introduction part, then body, and then conclusion. In AC2, you add a background paragraph to that, you add a discussion paragraph to that, so it becomes a lot more.
Yeah. So are you done, Paul, with your answer? Yeah. Okay. So we have the next question. Is it allowed to keep the same research topic for all 4 years? We would say that it's not banned, but it's a little bit frowned upon, in the sense that if you imagine if you have the same research topic for 4 years, chances are you're gonna repeat yourself for at least once, right? And repeating yourself would also count as plagiarism if you're not careful with that. Also, I think you need to, I think it's better if you differentiate between research topic and research interest, right? If you have a research interest, for example, you can definitely have a lot of research topics revolving around that research interest. But if you have the same research topic for all 4 years, chances are you're going to repeat yourself. And yeah, that's just not good.
Yeah. So I think one of our cardinal rules here at PAW is the first thing you're going to hear us say is ask your professor, check with your professor. What does your professor say? A lot of professors, are like, maybe you shouldn't use the same topic because then the point is to kind of do original research, come up with new points. Some are fine with it. So it really depends on what they want. Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think in general, if you keep the same research topic, a specific one for 4 years, the chances that you would not only repeat yourself but exhaust the whole idea of the topic and the research materials will be really high. So
yeah, I think Min made an excellent point about research interests versus research topic, because you can pick one broad area, or you don't have to pick it. It can just be something you're really interested in. Bitcoin, sustainability, K-pop, fast fashion, anything, because under your broad research interests, there's so many other topics you can go through, multiple. So you can definitely maintain a research focus or research interest, but even if it's for different classes, like Min said, you're going to end up repeating yourself at some point.
And it will also definitely.
Oh,
sorry,
no, go for.
Yeah, I was gonna say it will definitely give you a chance to just look at that specific topic from different perspectives, I would say. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Yeah, and just want to bring that up one more time. Repeating yourself is a form of plagiarism.
Yes, plagiarism is a thing. Plagiarizing other students, also a thing.
Yeah.
And because papers get submitted to turn it in through TIU, there are records of papers, and any form of direct or indirect plagiarism will get flagged.
Yeah.
But good question though.
So we're 3 minutes out, right? So I will just send in the chat the link to an attendance form just to get your attendance, to get your names, I think, and yeah,
so that'll mark that you were here. Please fill it out, it'll be very helpful to us. But we will be here for a while longer if anyone has any other questions. But otherwise, since it is now 1 p.m. here in Japan, if you don't have any further questions, or you're free to go. If you'd like to hear everyone else's questions being answered, please feel free to stay back. We'll be here for a bit longer.
And just a reminder that we will have our PAW one-on-one session starting next week.
21st, Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday.
So hopefully we can see as many people there as we want, will come.
So
no, do we have any other questions, anybody?
Let's go back to Sangbin's question a little bit.
Yeah.
So what was your question on topic selection, right, Sangbin?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just gonna write it down in the the message on my. I just want to ask that. So the thesis was the human rights and immigration, and this was the topic that I was coming up with. And then I just want to ask if this is really bad topics. Then I just want to know why.
Okay. Well,
sorry, real quick, should we stop the recording because this is like more personal question?
Yeah.
Comes after the workshop.
Yeah.
Go ahead.